Hello, I'm Doug, and this is the Taste and Sensibility channel. And today on Mild Melty Cheeses number 15, we're looking at Muenster. Muenster cheese has this thing that's got a bright orange rind on one or two or three surfaces of it. And it's usually cut from a big loaf. It might be in the deli, it might be packaged, it might be anywhere. But in this is apparently not recommended by Liz Thorpe, who I'm using as my guide in the Book of Cheese, and her Havarti Gateway chapter that we've been going through. So for 14 cheeses, she's liked things. She has recommended things, but this one is in a little box. It's not in the normal section of being recommended, but it's called Monster Cheese. Another American original, one that I'm less proud of than Colby or Monterey Jack, is Muenster. So she's mentioning it in a very backhanded way, saying it's a floppy slicing cheese, construction cone orange on the outside, cow milk, and pretty bland. But I'm finding a few differences in these different kinds. And she suggested Colby or Monterey Jack is an upgrade in flavor. So she's not a fan of it and not recommending it, but I found several versions of it here, and we're just going to go on through and give it a try. But before we get tasting, let me remind you to like this video, give it a thumbs up down there, leave comments and questions, and share it with people. And subscribe to the channel and click on that bell to get notified when the new videos come out. So I have opened up most of these packages. So I'm going to flop out the pieces I have onto this slate. And you can see there is a lot of orange involved here. Okay, this one won't come out of the packaging so much, but I can cut a big chunk. It is unwrapped. Okay, yeah, that's going to work. This one's open and available. And this one is Kraft Slices. So I'll just pull out a slice now. There's a holder or backing. Now let's put it over here. It doesn't matter much apparently. So in the past I have liked Muenster quite a bit. I remember buying big portions at Sam's and using it up for different sandwiches, for lunch or for breakfast sandwiches or for throwing it on a burger, until I ran out. I'm a single here in my household, and buying stuff at Sam's doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're going to use it every day for a couple of weeks or more. And that was the situation. So we're going to check out this. We got several brands here. So this is an American Farmhouse Muenster cheese. Now that it's at room temperature, it's a little oily on the outside, but it's got one of those bright red safety cone colors. And then this one is from Whole Foods. It says Roth brand domestic Muenster. And then this one is Boar's Head. So it's a national brand and famous for lots of things, all sorts of meats and cheeses. And this one is Kraft Slices. So this one will end up on a sandwich later. But I will sample the pieces I have here. So Liz is careful to make sure people don't confuse this with a very similar name, Muenster without the E. UE in German is usually a transliteration of an U umlaut. And the Muenster cheese in Germany, or that German part of France called Alsace, might be the origin of that one. So it may be just be an U. No umlaut sort of name for the Muenster cheese that's there. It's a West Rhine cheese. Ends up with an orange rind. Ends up with some funky flavors and aromas, and way stronger than this stuff. I'm finding this very middle of the road and to the bland side, to the mild side, as the name implies, mild melty cheeses. So I'm just gonna cut a chunk of this Roth domestic Muenster. There are versions of Muenster from Europe. I don't know if they're trying to imitate this or trying to imitate the Alsace Muenster, which is going to be in the next section with other washed-rind cheeses, but we aren't there yet in that group. So I'm going to take a piece of the Roth and see how it goes. Salty, moist, soft, very agreeable mouthfeel, and somewhat cheesy. This would be okay on a cheese board. If you threw it on a cracker, you wouldn't notice it. You'd go, yeah, that's a cheese. I think the orange rind is just a natto color and doesn't have any effect on the flavor at all. So it's a decent, mild, cheesy flavor. The Roth is not giving me a lot of dairy notes. It's a very soft texture. There's not a lot of mouthfeel to it that would grab anyone's interest. There's not a lot in the flavor that would grab anyone's interest. The lightest, mildest hints of dairy in milk, cream, butter, along those lines. So, the Roth is usually a pretty good brand. It's very often recommended by Liz, but she's not recommending it here, and I can see it's fairly bland, really. So, what surface will I cut for this guy? It has got some oily residue on my slate here. So I'll have a nice little slab of this American Farmhouse and cut a few pieces and see if I can tell any differences or distinctives. Tiny bit more bit of texture. They're both wet, they're very soft, they're very limp, they're at room temperature. And this has a similar salt level as the Roth. Might be a tiny bit more character to it, but it is hard to say. Everything is so subtle, all the differences are very mild so far between these two. And there's just not a lot going on there. It's not a lot to recommend it, not a lot to be offended by. So, wow, that is pretty bland. I'm going to move on to Boar's Head, which is a famous brand of deli meats and cheeses. They've got some example of everything pretty much. If people are looking for it, they've got some version, very likely. So I'll cut off a little strip of my room temperature cheese here. And get into the Boar's Head. Wow, it's very wet. Maybe less salt than these two. Maybe about the same. It's kind of hard to say. But certainly not more. Certainly not as much. Wow. No dairy notes of note. The lightest milk, cream. Maybe it goes as far as butter. Maybe not. It's just a wet, young, soft cheese. So, wow. So even the Boar's Head does not have a lot of flavor. So I remember using this mostly on sandwiches. I would throw it on a burger, make a ham and cheese sandwich, make some breakfast sandwich on an English muffin or a bagel or something with other things and meat. And I'd say it went okay. It melted okay. It always worked out. It was never offensive. It was never a problem. So I will move on to Kraft Slices, which is very thin with that little orange rind. And this one, I would say, it's a tiny bit more character or age or salt. Or maybe it's just a sliced cheese picking up odors and aromas from other things in its environment. It's hard to say. There's a bit more flavor here, but they're not cheese flavors. They're not dairy notes. So that's it for the neat cheese, I think. So are any of these interesting enough to spend a cracker on? I think Liz is right in her assessment. So American Farmhouse on a whole grain cracker with no wheat it was all cracker. Every note was from the cracker, and the cheese contributed very little. So I'm putting the Roth on a low salt Triscuit. Let's see how that works. Okay, the wheat was real interesting, but the dairy notes were very weak. So a little bit of fatty mouthfeel, a little bit of richness, but not very much flavor at all. Wow, kind of surprising. So let's put on a flatbread and see if it reveals anything there. Oh, that was a bad break. So we'll use the boar's head. Come on. I cut you. Why aren't you coming apart? I think that's two pieces, but maybe it needs the extra help. Let's go. Wow. Okay. Only the mildest of flavors. Oh no, flatbread. So the cheese is not really standing out in any of these things. Wow, that's a lot of apricot bits in this thing. And a pistachio. There's very many things in this little cracker with a lot of cheese on it. Let's see if dairy notes show up. A tiny bit. There are 3 or 4 different flavors coming from the cracker, and the fruit, and the nuts, and the things that are in it. But very little showing up from the cheese. Okay, well, that's about the final assessment too. Super mild, not much to it. Doesn't show up the way the other ones do. And the other previous 13 and 14 in this series, which are also mild in flavor. So this is kind of eye-opening. I used to seek out this stuff, so I'll have to reassess my opinion of Muenster. Doesn't seem to have a lot to recommend it. So let me get some on a buttery cracker and do some sort of pairing. Here's a good chunk of the Roth. Let me just combine it with pineapple all by itself. Okay, a small slice of pineapple, not too juicy. This pineapple is not terribly sweet, not terribly sour or tart. A little bit slippery. So I'll throw the cheese on the pineapple and see if it's a pairing. Okay. As a pairing, it's way more successful. There's contrast between the juiciness, fruitiness of the pineapple and the maybe the saltiness and fat mouthfeel of the cheese. But it wasn't a super standout or anything, it was just a contrast. Let me try something about the right size to go up against a mission fig. It's cut in half, so it's just a part of one. Oh wow. Let's see how this goes. Sent me a bunch of smushed soft things. Okay. There was a fig flavor and then a crunchy cracker. It's interesting, seeds and grains. The cheese didn't really show up in that. So I think Liz is convincing me. I was a fan of Muenster for certain uses, and I am not really finding a lot of flavor here. So I'll go ahead and do my last trick, which is it's going to be a grilled ham and cheese sandwich with this as the cheese. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare that and bring it back and tell you what I find. Back in a minute. So I'm back with my melted application of Muenster cheese in this grilled ham and cheese. So I'm going to slice it in two and start tasting. So I used the Kraft Slices for this because they were the most convenient size. And what we have is a little bit of, that wet deli ham and a very thin slice of Muenster on each side. So let's go see what's in here. So, good toasty bread, good ham flavor, and I can tell there's a melted cheese in there, but the flavors aren't strong. Overall effect is good, but just because of melted, fatty mouthfeel and salt, the ham and cheese part is good. The toasty bread grilled is good. No particular flavor of the cheese is jumping out other than salt. So I can't really say I get dairy notes or any particular character of cheese. So I can tell it's a ham and cheese. I can tell it's adequate for that, but there's no character to the cheese I can point to and go, oh, that's really good. Interesting. So I will eat the rest off camera. But this is sort of eye-opening today, where I thought I was a big fan of Muenster cheese and used it in several different kinds of things, including this ham and cheese. And now I'm reassessing what did I like about it? Did I think the flavors were? So I'm not really finding any. So I can't really give any of these different Muensters a thumbs up on as a recommend or because of the flavors they have. So it's a good melter. It works for those applications, but it doesn't really bring any extra dairy notes or flavors. So that's the way the ball bounces sometimes. So I guess we'll wrap up with that. So again, like, subscribe, click the bell to get notified, and leave comments and questions. And next time, we'll probably have a more interesting mild melty cheese. So cheers.